From the land of conjurers flying through the internet to your device like a UAP, hauntingly unexplained and downright weird, this is the Witching Hours, and we are ready to take off in the flash of an eye. Good evening to one and all, wherever and whenever you are listening to this program. I am China the Frost, and joining me, as always, is the medium Jenny Lee. How are you doing, Jenny?
So much better. I'm not so sick anymore. This is wonderful.
So much better.
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
I feel like almost like myself again.
Yeah. It's been a rough couple of weeks. Even our cat was sick, so
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even know what happened with that. Just, like, can I get a break here?
Yeah, it's going around, and I'm sure many of you are experiencing it too. It's a lot of stuff going around. It's the time of year for it, so hopefully everyone out there is healthy and getting through this time of the year okay, I guess. Flu seasons and all these different kinds of things, stomach bugs and COVID and
and the pollen is right around the corner.
Yeah, around. Here we go. If you have allergies, you're probably dreading that. Welcome in, one and all. We have a wonderful show for you tonight. We're going to have Tim Kelly on for a little bit, and we're going to have Alyson, the Priestess of Wonderland, here on in just a moment to come talk about March moon phases. So make sure you have your notes handy to figure out what's going to be going on with that. And we have some pretty interesting things right around the corner that's going to be happening with all of that. A couple of notes that I did want to mention is, for you that are hanging out in Twitch chat, we have a new emote courtesy of Reptar. So I know a lot of you are familiar with Reptar. So we got a little dancing alien guy. And that's created by Reptar.
It's an emote. That's
really
awesome.
Cool. It's really awesome. So, throw those up there and have fun with the dancing. I love the dancing alien. Yeah. Good to go. Just some programming notes to go over kind of real quickly. Next week, we're going to have Sam Baltrusis on, and we met him at the Hanover Tavern Paracon.
He's very nice.
Yeah, he's going to be a great guest. He's got a lot of stuff to talk about. We're looking forward to it. And then we're going to be taking another week off, like 2 weeks and within a month. We're going to be taking off, but we're going to be out of town. We're going to be wrist deep in some Chicago deep dish pizza, I imagine, at that point in time. So we're going to go see The Wander out in Chicago. So we are not going to be live on the 21st, but we're going to return the last week of March with Dolly Saffron.
Yay!
So that's going to be, I know Jenny's been waiting for that one to continue, kind of in some ways, just to continue the conversation that you had with them on the Light Gate.
So many questions for her about things that we experience. Yeah.
And other than that, we're kind of back in the mode of I'm talking to a lot of people right now, getting ready to start getting booked up. I imagine we'll book it up to the summer at this point. Yeah. So we got that going on. We already do have confirmed on April 25th. We're going to have Haunts of Richmond on. So that's, local for us, but a group that we were with at Hanover, and really a really knowledgeable group that was on there that know a lot of really haunted places, that have a lot of paranormal and ghost hunting experience. So that's going to be a really fun time.
Cool. He was also a very nice man.
Yeah, he was really cool, which is one of the reasons, we invited him to be on the show.
Yeah.
If we would have met them and him, and I think his wife might come on too, who's also with Haunts of Richmond. If they were not cool, we would not have invited them on the show. So very true. So we've got a lot of stuff to look forward to. There's a lot of other very cool guests. I'm still kind of waiting for Sarah Bressman Cosme to get back in country, and we will reschedule the appearance that she wasn't able to make. So we'll still have the QHHT stuff lined up. So lots of stuff coming. So keep up on the website if you need to, thewitchinghourspodcast.com, where all of our shows and past episodes and all of those things can be found, our merch store. And I think we're going to get some new merch here soon. I've been working on some stuff. So springtime's coming around. We can get some new threads going out there.
Is it time for the news?
It is. We ready to do the news?
Yep. What do you got for us this week?
All right. So we've talked a lot on this show about the James Webb Telescope. The James Webb Telescope reveals targets for next year. The beloved James Webb Telescope will soon begin working on a fascinating to-do list for 2024 and 2025, including research into black holes, alien moons, dark energy, and more. The Space Telescope Science Institute has announced which astronomy proposals have been selected to be given time with the James Webb Space Telescope over the next 2 years. The organization outlined 253 general observers that will use humanity's most powerful and sensitive space telescope for a collective 5,500 hours between July 24th and June 2025. 5,500 hours that groups will be using this. And essentially what they're going to be looking for, one of them is going to be potential exomoons, or moons that surround exoplanets. So exoplanets themselves, in conjunction with their atmospheres, supermassive black holes, and even distant galaxies that existed during the dawn of time.
Nice.
The James Webb Telescope will also study large-scale structures in the cosmos to reveal details about the accelerating expansion of the universe and dark energy, the mysterious force that drives such movement. So they're going to be looking for extrasolar moons. So not only are we finding planets outside of our solar system, but now they're going to be seeing if they can look at moons that surround those planets that are so far away from us. So cool. It sounds like it could be a really interesting couple of years.
Yeah.
For what they have lined up for that. Yeah.
Party pictures.
Yeah. And in not so good news, the Arctic could be ice free by 2034.
That's pretty
study.
Fast.
Yeah. Grim new, well.
That's only 10 years from now, people.
A grim new study reveals that the Arctic could have no sea ice at all within the next 10 years. Researchers from the University of Colorado Boulder indicate that the Arctic could experience its first summer days without sea ice within the next few years, significantly earlier than previously anticipated. This projection underscores a rapid decline in Arctic sea ice that could precede ice-free conditions for an entire month by the mid-21st century, with potential for several months of ice-free conditions by century's end, depending on future greenhouse gas emissions. Ice-free in Arctic terms is defined when sea ice extent falls below 1 million square kilometers, a dramatic drop from the 1980s seasonal minimum of approximately 5 times that amount. Currently, the Arctic's minimum sea ice coverage in September hovers around 3.3 million square miles, but it is rapidly decreasing. This marks a significant acceleration in the timeline for Arctic sea ice loss, with the first ice-free day potentially occurring up to 18 years earlier than monthly averages had suggested.
CMC's right, though. They've been saying this since the 90s. But then I have a follow-up question. If all the ice is melted, does Santa turn in his sleigh for a ski-doo?
Yeah, it's very possible. I think that the big concern there is, well, I don't know. Maybe you shouldn't invest in beach property right now. That would be my.
But I mean, don't we know though that the Earth will fix it, and then we'll just be in an ice age instead? It'll be the opposite.
I think this is an argument that I've had with myself and in my brain for a long time about. Like when I was younger and I heard about this, and there's an argument about whether it's man-made, and then we know that the Earth goes through climatic shifts anyway, and like, what's the difference, and how is all this going to pan out?
Yeah.
I still think that no matter what, it's going to be a drastic change. I don't think we're going to change if it is man-made or if it isn't man-made or whatever. There's still going to be dramatic climate change, and I don't know. I think we have to prepare for it at this point. I don't think we're in any situation where we're going to make any drastic changes in the next 5 years. It's going to stop it. Yeah, exactly.
Things are going to be different.
Yeah. Priestess, maybe Richmond will be beachfront property. Well, it's like what Maynard from Tool was talking about, buying beachfront property in Arizona. So there.
Yeah.
So there we go. Anyway, we talk a lot about things that are on planes in the news on this show. And this week is no different. So maggots fall on Delta passenger from overhead bin.
Oh, no.
A passenger on Delta Airlines flight from Amsterdam to Detroit is probably very bugged by her experience. That's because at least a dozen maggots fell from an overhead bin and onto the woman, which led to the flight returning to the Netherlands. And the flights always return. I mean, 12. It's a dozen. I mean, it doesn't sound, it's 12. I mean,
a dozen maggots. Just pick them off, throw them in the trash can. Let the woman, I don't know.
If you just took off, it's like one thing. But if you're over the Atlantic and you got to carry around.
I mean, I guess they'd had to figure out where the maggots came from.
Well,
right? Like, what if there was more in there? I mean, I don't know.
The unidentified woman's seatmate told the Fox affiliate in Detroit how the woman reacted to having the creepy larva descend upon her. She was freaking out, he said. She was just trying to kind of fight off these maggots. Schott said at first he thought the maggots were some kind of prank, but had no clue what was really happening. I don't really know what was going on in my mind. I was trying to process it. Disgust is one thing, of course. We had to wait there for help to actually come. He was eventually moved to another seat while flight attendants searched the overhead bins for the source, and they found that there was a rotten fish in there. I did see everyone's. Smell it?
Who doesn't smell that?
I don't know. I did see everyone's reaction to the bag being opened, which was just an immediate pinching of the nose.
Oh, good Lord.
The man then claimed the ownership of the rotting fish, which was wrapped in a newspaper. So someone brought it on the plane. Yeah. The flight attendants grabbed the maggot-infested fish and took it back to the back of the plane. The plane was flying over England when the pilot informed passengers they were returning to Amsterdam.
Well, somebody said, I think it was Princess Boo Boo said it's a border security thing, which that's true. That's true.
Yeah, that's true when it comes to food and stuff like that.
Although when I went to Guatemala, I was standing at the baggage claim and there was clearly a bag that was full of stinky cheese going around and around. So somebody let cheese go on the plane.
There was another one the other day with dead monkeys.
Dead monkeys? What the hell?
Someone coming from Africa. And they had dead monkeys.
Oh my God.
That they used for bushmeat. And the dogs sniffed it out at the airport.
Well, good job, dogs.
Yeah. So lots of weird, interesting things.
What is wrong with people? Rotten fish, dead monkeys.
Bees. We had bees.
Stinky
we had the
cheese.
snake. Yeah, we've had a lot of stuff on the planes.
And the explosive diarrhea down the whole airplane. That was the best one.
That was the worst. Didn't that win like the funniest news story of the year when we did?
Yeah, I think it did.
Yeah,
I think it did. Yeah,
that one was pretty brutal. And we're gonna end tonight on a good story. Luck strikes twice for a Kentucky couple. Luck struck twice for a Kentucky couple who thought they lost a winning Powerball ticket.
Oh goodness!
The Bowling Green couple found out in November that they had won $50,000, but couldn't find the ticket they had purchased about a week before.
That would be us.
Yeah, I was thinking I can identify with this. So Mark Perdue said the owner at AM Express congratulated him when he walked into the convenience store. And he said, "For what?" And the person working there said, "You won the lottery." And he said, "I wish." And then the person behind the counter said, "You did. We have it on video." He and his wife then looked, but couldn't find the ticket and thought it might have been thrown away. I've been beating myself up for 3 months thinking I threw this ticket away, his wife said.
Where was it?
Then in February, Perdue, who is president of Kiru USA, went to check out the condition of a company car and saw the ticket inside. The car, which isn't used often, was needed because a visitor from another plant was in town and needed to use the company vehicle. I don't know how long it might have sat out there if I hadn't needed that car, Perdue said. I was shaking a little bit. He told his wife, and the next day they went to lottery headquarters where they received a check for $36,000 after taxes. The couple said they planned to pay off bills and make a trip.
Goodness gracious.
So there we go.
Well, you know, there's many times, I mean, there are many times, though, that somebody wins and it's not claimed. So what happens
quite a bit.
And a person probably threw it away. Didn't even realize it.
And I've thought about it a lot of time. There's been many times that I've bought a lottery ticket. I don't play very often, like very rarely do we play the lottery. Every once in a while.
like once every 10 years or something.
Yeah, something like that. And then a lot of times when I do get one, I'll forget that I even bought it. So I never even checked to see if it won or not. So
I still remember at a Christmas party, Frosty won one of the door prizes and he had lost the ticket. It was something good too. I'm still mad about it. I was like 20 years ago.
All right. So, all right. We're going to see hopefully everything is working. We're going to talk about the moon. We're going to welcome on Alyson, the Priestess of Wonderland, coming to you via satellite straight from Wonderland. So let's see. Hopefully everything works out here. Oh, we're going to have to move Alyson real quick. Boop, 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 boop. There we go. How are you doing, Alyson?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. So what do we have?
Everybody is well again.
Yeah, everyone's on the mend. I've been doing, I think I said the other night, is like the Neo dodge. I've been able to dodge all the nastiness, but everyone else around me has gotten it. So I think it seems like we're all on the mend, so we'll keep our fingers crossed. So what do we have going on with the moon for March, Alyson?
Well, a lot of this month, I think, is going to feel like this crescendo to April. So there isn't really that much going on, at least not for the beginning of March. And then eclipse season is happening at the end of March. And then we have eclipses in April. And there's big astrological things happening in April. And March is just kind of feeling like it's leading up to that. So today, I mean, we're really close to a new moon, and slowly all of the moons this year are going to get closer and closer to the first of the month. So like in the past, when we've met for these moon meetings, we've been closer to the full moon, and slowly we just like eventually make it so that the new moon, I think the new moon in November and December is on the first of the month. So this is way different energy than like when I've been on before. We've had full moons, or it was like just after a full moon, and that's like a lot of energy. Whereas a new moon is, or where we are right now, a wax or waning crescent moon is decreasing energy, and our new moon in Pisces is on Saturday. So we've been in Pisces season. Last month was all this Aquarius energy. Now this month is Pisces energy, which is water. And I could kind of consider Pisces energy to be not as emotional as the other water signs, but it's more of kind of like a dreamy, subconscious kind of energy. So technically tomorrow we're moving into that Pisces energy anyways. Today we're in Aquarius, tomorrow is Pisces, and that's going to put us into that new moon energy. And this is setting intentions about kind of believing in your dreams, going to that like subconscious level, and like using your imagination, like exploring the infinite possibilities that we have. And then next month is Aries, which is fire. And that's when we take action on things. Pisces energy, being water energy, is also kind of cleansing and releasing. And you kind of see that with the seasons, especially like if you're in a more northern state, that's when like all that black, dirty snow is melting, and you have all of this water just like washing the winter away, kind of like cleansing and releasing. Here in the South, we get a lot of rain this time of year. It's just like all this water is just like letting everything go.
Oh, well, I was getting ready to say, Alyson, I think the rain washed away the winter before it even happened here this year.
Well, right. I mean, we didn't have any winter at all.
Yeah.
We had a lot of rain this winter, and a lot of gray, cloudy days. So hopefully those are going to start giving us some sunshine and some fire within the next month. The big astrological shift is the planets are also, like the closer planets to us are also moving into Pisces. So Venus moves into Pisces next week. Mercury had already moved into Pisces. And then later this month, Mars is in Pisces. So the planets closer to us, one by one, eventually kind of stay around what the sun is doing. And so when we look at Venus in Pisces is hopeless romantic. Venus is the planet of love. Pisces is watery and dreamy. So it's kind of hopeless romantic kind of feeling. And Mars in Pisces is a little bit counterintuitive because Mars is like action and war and movement, and Pisces is just like go with the flow, float around kind of energy. So Mars in Pisces to me feels like whitewater rafting. Like that water is moving very quickly. So we've got the new moon in Pisces at this weekend. Venus moves into Pisces next week. Mars moves into Pisces the week after that. And then we have our big Libra lunar eclipse, which is kicking off the eclipse season the first eclipse season for this year. And so that's happening on March 25th at the end of the month. And the lunar eclipse is when the moon is being blocked by the earth. So normally we have a big, bright, illuminated moon. When it's eclipsed, the earth is blocking it, so it's dark. So it kind of has that energy of a new moon, of dark, introspective. With Libra, we're talking about the scales of justice. We're talking about balance. And an eclipse usually brings to the surface something from the subconscious, something that needs your attention. And a lot of times it's not something that we like. So that's why we want to prepare for this eclipse season with all of that Pisces, dreamy, watery, believing in your dreams kind of energy. And then whatever comes up at the eclipse, just be ready for it to figure out how to balance those scales. And then we've got lots of stuff happening in April. So the month of March is just kind of, I think, maybe preparing for that, cleansing and releasing, letting go of things, letting go of 2023 if you haven't yet, so that you're ready to start things in the spring and you're ready to face whatever's coming with eclipse season.
Well, that sounds good. I kind of feel that kind of resonates with me because I feel like, we are kind of getting ready to move into a new thing. So it kind of makes sense to, kind of have that last little bit of letting things wash away and getting ready to start that new part of the year. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope. I
get ready to get in your inner tube and go whitewater rafting through eclipse season.
Yeah. Well, we're in the process right now. Me and Ginny are planning all of our trips for the witching hours and all that stuff, and trying to line up some cool stuff to go to. So it kind of does feel like that. It's like, weather's kind of bad right now. We still got all this stuff going on, but the spring's right around the corner, and we don't want to go out and investigate in the cold anymore. I want our next investigation to be like nice weather where I can wear some shorts, So we're looking forward to it. Well, thank you so much.
The Lake Shawnee amusement park investigation. I was cold watching that video.
We actually had the opportunity. I was just talking to them today. They're going back the first week of April, and they invited us out again. Cool. But we will have just be getting back from Chicago. So I said, we're going to catch you guys on something, but we can't do that one. But we'll definitely be meeting back up with them. But yes, that was a very cold night. Very cold.
It looked cold.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Alyson, as always, for the update for the month of March. And we look forward to having you back on soon.
Thanks, Alyson.
All right. Excellent. All right. So tonight's guest, Tim is the founder of Polytope Press and author of The Natural Healing Self-Empowerment, the world's most powerful health book, and Optiflex booklet, teaching people how to attain optimal fitness at home using no equipment. Additionally, he has written the history text, Hidden History of Humanity, revealing sweeping new insights from Atlantis to the present, as well as designing a three-dimensional periodic table, developing origins of species, and writing articles promoting the technology to enable independent homesteads, plus the ideal production system, the template economy. He has also written multiple novels, including The Math Wizard, which attempts to reverse engineer the 7-step path to enlightenment once offered in Atlantis. Please welcome back to the show for the second time, Tim Kelly. Tim, welcome to the Witching Hours once again.
Thanks for having me back.
If for those out there listening and those in chat now, if you did not catch the first episode, definitely go back and catch up on that, because we're going to be talking about, I think tonight, when we and Jenny were kind of preparing for the show tonight, we were talking about, there was a lot of information. And I know there's probably other topics that we could really delve into tonight, but I really do think that there's a lot of things that I still just really wanted to talk to you more about from our last. Like we said all the time, we have guests on, you got 2 hours or an hour and a half or whatever. That's so much time. How are we going to talk about, how are we going to fill that time? And that was just another example of 2 hours just being the tip of the iceberg. So, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. I know, Jenny, you were chomping at the bit earlier. So, let's go ahead and get started. Where do we want to start off tonight?
I had told Tim this before we started, but chat doesn't know that I went back through and I listened to our interview with him, which was about 4 months ago, I look like, according to YouTube land. And I just went, as I was re-listening to it, I just started writing down questions. So I have a series of questions, but I like I said, I definitely want to leave a lot of time to talk about the Paradise on Earth. So, in the last interview, at the very beginning of the interview, you were talking about a significant event that's about to occur to us currently based on things that have happened in the past, but we didn't get to talk about what that was. So what's coming our way, Tim?
Well, basically, it's the culmination of a little history. There was a plan that was begun in ancient Sumer to take over the planet. There was a methodology that was begun of creating tyrants, certain what I would refer to as sun god cults, and these were allied to a group that is often referred to as the banksters. The bankster term is a modification of a simple banker, because there actually have been here and there a few legitimate bankers in history, but the term bankster was coined to describe a gangster bankster. So
that's kind of fun to say, though, gangster bankster.
Yes. So
not that they're fun.
Banker, right. The gangster banking began in Babylon, and the methodologies of tying these banksters with cults began in ancient times, because they were the ones who were minting the money. And the way that you can tell that is because when you looked at the money, you saw their cult symbols. The temples were intimately involved with the creation of money. And of course, if you whip out a $1 bill to this day, you can look at it and it's filled with those very same cult symbols. Now, the banksters accelerated their plan in the late 1770s. As is well known, I describe in Hidden History of Humanity 14-point plan that was outlined and was deployed. The banksters deployed, creating central banks in 5 major cities in Europe. And the plans also extended, of course, into the United States as well. When you count the number of nations that are on planet Earth, and you look at the number of nations that are not controlled by the banksters, you can now count them on less than the fingers of one hand. So basically, this plan has, to a very significant extent, reached its conclusion. And there are a number of indications of major things that must be avoided if humanity wishes to remain free. One of the first, of course, is the creation of what are called central bank digital currencies. When we reach this stage, if we were to reach this stage, all money would become digital. And the prototype model for this oftentimes is China. What happens in places like China, for example, can be, if you dare to criticize the government, maybe all the money vanishes from your bank account. If you step out of line in different ways, there are a number of strategies that can be used to shut your life down.
Mm-hmm.
For example, there is a goal to digitize pretty much everything into what's called the Internet of Things. If you do that and you're fully integrated into the grid, then with a flip of a switch, if someone in the government no longer likes you, they can turn off the water to your house.
Wow.
They can turn off the electricity to your house.
Yeah.
They can pretty much.
Are we kind of already there? I mean,
yeah.
In the United States, anyway, feels like it.
Right. So the question looming before us all is: do we wish to allow the complete centralization of power? In which case, to a very significant extent, humanity is all over, or are we going to decentralize? And in relation to humanity itself, another extremely significant aspect of this is the sanctity of the human genome. For centuries, we've had some integrity as humans, thanks largely to what the Atlanteans gave us originally, but also to what nature itself gave us originally. That is now at risk. We do have genetic modification programs. There are people who are talking about two different things that can happen. One would be the unnatural corruption of human DNA so that we are no longer the species Homo sapiens sapiens anymore. We could be, again, part reptile, part human. Another option, which is accelerating extremely rapidly, is that we could merge with AI. Now, if you've been listening to the agents at the World Economic Forum, they are shouting, screaming, going on and on and on about the tremendous virtues of having human beings have microchips inside them.
Yeah.
And they'll seduce you in. One of the initial ways of seduction is going to be, we're going to start off with quadriplegics and paraplegics, and we're going to give people some limb function again.
Well,
and,
we've had this argument.
Yeah. So Tim, we were talking about this. I think we had it on our last news segment. The first successful. Well, we were talking about Elon Musk and the Neuralink, and that's been done now. I mean, it's not a question of science fiction anymore. This is something that has been done to a human being. We have a processor in someone's brain, and I think that is going to fundamentally change what the future looks like. I mean, I guess that's kind of where you're going with that, right?
Well, again, the seduction will go on. What if you could run faster? What if you could think faster? And then can we get to become more of a what they're basically calling Homo board genesis, if you've heard that term?
I have not heard that term. So I'll have you explain that to me in 1 second. But I just wanted to mention, I've had, one of the reasons we do, I've had this conversation with just like coworkers and just kind of people I've run into talking about this. And, on one side of it, I was kind of for the technology under the guise that it's being the way it's being delivered.
We know that's not what they're going to use it for.
Yeah, for people who have debilitating conditions, for people who don't have use of their legs, whatever those disabilities and stuff are, what a wonderful use of technology to give someone part of the human experience back. I don't know if medicine. I mean, that's what medicine is for, right? To a certain degree. But like you just said, I think that opens the door to a lot of very questionable things. And so it was interesting because the conversation about this has changed depending on who I talk to. Because you talk to somebody and you say, oh, well, people who were confined to wheelchairs, maybe there's the possibility that they'll be able to use their legs and walk again, which is fantastic. But
so I can't disagree with that.
What is going to happen to sports? What's going to happen when, and not like that's important, but just looking at the fact that humans are going to be able to recognize things quicker. They're going to be able to, the eye-hand coordination, just the ability of what humans are going to be able to achieve is going to transcend what we know now. And just like you were saying, that's just not for maybe physical activities, but people who are doing any kind of work.
Right, but the purpose, to a large extent, of what I feel my life is about is defending nature. And I'm not going to embrace this in any way, shape, or form. And the main reason I'm not going to embrace it is we have a number of people who are telling us about all these wondrous, virtuous things that their technology is going to do. And there is not one of them who has ever dared to learn the full extent of what nature could do. And that is what is present in my research. You talk about, oh, well, wouldn't it be wonderful if technology could get somebody to work with a damaged limb? Did you know that nature could do that? Did you know that nature could have done this the entire time? Did you know that anything that technology could do, nature could do 1,000 times better and without any risks of you being turned into what Yuval Harari calls a human being as a hackable animal?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that concern you?
Oh, 100%. 100%. So, there's obviously sides of it that sound beneficial at the front, which is what I was kind of trying to say before. There are really questionable ethical concerns about what that's going to lead to, including the idea of just being able to essentially just, I don't know, push a button and just have someone cease to exist. Like if something can control the limbs, if someone can control the limbs and this chip inside of a brain is able to help you function as a human being, and you have all these wonderful things that they're going to promise with this, what happens when you are seen as a threat to some kind of political movement and they just decide that everyone who's against them is no longer going to be alive and they just deactivate the
Frosty,
switch?
Are you aware of the origins of 5G and what it was supposed to be used for in China?
I would love to hear about this because I keep hearing things about 5G that are like, that there's terrible things, but like I haven't heard anybody explain it yet. So yes, please.
Well, a lot of it had to do with crowd control. They didn't like people questioning the government in China. So they would broadcast these signals and it would cause so much damage to people that they would disperse. So when you accelerate this technology, you will have the ability to have no one question you in a lot of different ways. This is another part of what goes on with the chipping process. I mean, you've probably heard at least some of the stories about people who can place magnets and they'll just attach to their bodies because of a substance called graphene oxide. I don't know have you discussed graphene oxide on your program at all?
No.
I don't think we have, no.
Okay, well, if you investigate it, you can look up videos and you can see what this stuff does. It's extensible. You present it with a certain electromagnetic field and it'll extend like tentacles. You put it by a cell phone, it looks like a living creature moving back and forth. And it is self-assembling nanocomponents of computer chips inside human beings. And you can coordinate that with 5G and basically you're putting your people into a realm of mind control. I saw a story. I have no idea whether or not this story is true. I definitely saw the video, though, of a woman in Ireland who was complaining that there were forces outside her body that were, number one, speaking in her head, and she couldn't get them to shut up. And two, they were literally taking control of her body, making her limbs move involuntarily. So she went to the police. They all laughed at her.
Of course.
And these are the potential of where this technology could go. And again, for every single benefit that you can think of that would take you down this road, my question is, why are we not looking to all the pioneers? I know many of them are not known to most of the people listening, but they're known to people like me. Why have we turned away from everyone who is showing us how to accomplish every goal that we want to accomplish naturally in such a way that you could not be happy?
Well, I'll say, to add to that conversation, I won't get into into it a whole lot, but I do have a dear friend who served in the military, who was found to have some kind of chip implanted. I've seen the medical reports and I've seen the x-rays of it. And so this is another a kind of thing that goes with the Neuralink. And the idea that you're seeing these things used on the civilian side means that these have already extensively been tested and used by the military. There's no technology that we have that isn't used as a weapon first. And so I think, what you're talking about reminds me a lot of things that I kind of know, not necessarily that it's true, but have definitely brought up some very big suspicions on my end.
And what would be your next question, Jenny?
Okay. So moving along through the
Oh, well, there was one other thing. You had said a word.
Okay,
You had said a really long, big word there that you were asking if we understood what that was. And we said we are going to get to that. What was that again?
Homoborggenesis.
Homoborggenesis. Okay. So what is that exactly?
This is a term that's being coined for the goal of folks like those running the World Economic Forum for what they want to turn human beings into, a whole new species that is part AI and part human.
Like
and
the Borgs from Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. That's where the word comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you would not have independent thought. You will think the thoughts that they want to have. And everything in your body, everything is going to be in a database. So, when last time you had sex, that'll be in the database. They will know that. These sensors that are inside the body will be revealing absolutely everything about you, and it'll go into a database. The graphene oxide can basically permeate the entire body. And again, is this what you want to become? Do you want to become something that is no longer human? Or are you going to be seduced by the idea that you're somehow going to become superior if you're part robot?
It's like 1984 mixed with some robot movies.
Well, resistance is futile. So
good Lord. Okay. So my next question, based on our previous conversation, was you had mentioned a corruption that was beyond human within we kind of, what we're talking about right now, the global governments and whatnot. So what is I'm assuming you're talking about like an ET element, like an alien element. Were you specifically referring to the reptilians, or is there something else that's going on there?
Well, there's definitely something else that's going on there. So I remember I was doing a podcast with another individual, and he was asking me questions about this similar topic. And eventually I brought up the topic of the devil. And he let out a little chuckle. Mm-hmm. And when I heard that chuckle, I thought to myself, that reminds me of when I was a kid in grade school. Because when I was a kid in grade school, I went to a Catholic school, and it's like, you ate that extra Snickers bar, maybe the devil's going to get you. So when the devil is portrayed to you in that way, that's the response that you have. You snicker. Mm-hmm. But as an adult, I have grown up, and I have encountered a lot of research that is extremely dark. And now when I hear the term the devil, I look at that in a completely different way. I am aware of a history of mass murder. I'm aware of hundreds of thousands of people who were slaughtered, not just, Aztec sacrifices, but all over the globe. Mm-hmm. I'm aware of rituals. I'm aware of demonic possession. I'm aware of escapees who were once part of devil worshipping cults. They talk about the demons that were involved with possessions. And I've tracked a lot of those stories. And when I see those kinds of stories and hear everything that's involved, especially the murder of infants and the extreme torture of individuals to extract a certain substance from their bodies that will prolong life in a very bizarre way. Speaking of this substance, there was one time when I was actually at a bus stop, and I was talking to a very strange individual, and I was glad to end that conversation as quickly as possible. But he was telling me that he spent a significant amount of time in China, and I was a little startled to hear him say what he said, which was that parts of China actually extract this substance somewhat routinely from dogs. And I knew that, I had heard stories along the lines that the Chinese eat dogs, but what I had not heard was that Chinese, just looking on dogs as like, I guess, a meaningless life form, would torture the dog for killing it. And the reason that they tortured it was to make sure that this substance was produced in the body so that they could consume it as part of their food for its health benefit. Mm-hmm. So the deeper you study this becomes a lot less comical. And it becomes much more serious. There was one woman, Jessie Zaboter, anyone can look up her experience, who was at extremely high levels in this cult. She talked about experiences firsthand where a diabolical entity picked somebody up and threw them across the room. I've had other stories that go along these lines. So when when you tune to darkness, you do go beyond the human to other realms.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there are going to be ETs involved, but guess what? Some of the ETs themselves are also going to tune to this dark consciousness.
Yeah, of course.
So it's a combination of a multitude of factors. And that is what I'm talking about. This is what we're up against is extremely serious. And there are people whose idea of corruption, as I said, goes far beyond human understanding of corruption.
Yeah.
It goes to places that most people just could never even imagine.
So is it, I mean, really, is it, are we really, if we zoom out far enough, are we really just talking about like the battle between good and evil, or service to others versus service to self? Like, it seems like that's what's going on here. The polarity of the negative and the positive.
Yes, I think the last characterization is probably the best one, though. Positive and negative.
Mm-hmm.
There's one group that is positive and another group that is negative. It's not so much the self versus selfless. There's ideas in that regard. I found the philosopher Thoreau to be pretty much my favorite philosopher of all time. One of the interesting things that he said on this topic is something I believe in very strongly, which is when it comes to goodness, the best acts are not necessarily service to others. It's doing what you love to do and becoming your best self. Thoreau said that he got the greatest benefit from seeing people who just loved their lives. They weren't trying to give anyone any benefit, but by the nature of their being, by loving what they were doing and doing it well, that was the greatest gift that they could give to others. And that's what Thoreau said he found.
Well, just think about that. I mean, when I'm at my best, I'm not out trying to be kind to everyone else because I'm out trying to change the world. I'm being kind to everybody else because I'm happy. I'm happy with myself. I'm happy with my life. I love who I am. And when you have those things, you're naturally going to radiate that to the people that you come across and the people that you encounter.
Well, Thoreau's little joke on the subject was, if I knew someone was coming over my house to do me good, I would run for my life.
Well, some of what you're talking about. So, you have to be patient with me. I'm still thinking about things that happened a couple minutes ago, but what you were talking about earlier kind of got me thinking about an article that I had just read about John D. Rockefeller, who I knew pretty well from a history point of view. But the article was kind of interesting, and it kind of delves into some of the things that we were talking about today, which was the idea that, Rockefeller owns Standard Oil. It gets broken up because of the antitrust. Standard Oil gets broken up into all the different oil companies, and Rockefeller didn't appreciate it. And he kind of plotted to have revenge for breaking up his company that he built. And so one of the ways he decided to do that was to take the petrochemicals that he'd been working on and be able to corner the market for that to be the medicine that was going to be created. So he was able to push using his money to create petrochemicals and chemicals to be the new medicine rather than using the plant-based medicine that had been used up until that point. Which I think when you talk about the banksters and the people behind the scenes and this idea that we have, the politicians don't really run anything. And so that just kind of, just that I had just read that article kind of made me think about that specifically about people controlling really what we put in our bodies without having any other options to the contrary, or at least not knowing or thinking that we have any options to the contrary.
So several points on that. First is, do you know the nickname of John Rockefeller's ancestor?
I don't. Not that I know of, anyway.
Bevel Billy.
Hmm.
And do you know what he did as a profession?
I don't.
Snake oil salesman.
That's interesting.
Okay, so then in
and
line
so was
with
Johnny Rockefeller.
in line with what you were saying, he, along with allies working for this dark side, started an initiative known to history and as the Flexner Report. of 1910. And they went through the U.S. medical schools. They told people that they were getting rid of quackery. And basically what they were doing is getting rid of people who were working with nature. And they told the public they wanted to also make sure that they got rid of any witchcraft that was being conducted in United States medicine.
That's still a taboo thing, that if you're using nature as medicine, that it's witchcraft still.
Oh, you're a quack.
Yeah.
Right. And so what was all of this replaced with? It was replaced with a methodology that is called pharmacy. Now, guess what happens when you look up the word pharmacy and look at its etymology? Do you know where the word pharmacy derives from?
I don't believe I do.
Witchcraft.
They just changed the word. We're really good at that.
So they said that they were getting rid of all the witchcraft, replaced everything with pharmacy, and pharmacy derives from witchcraft.
I love it. Goodness.
All right, we have a question from you from Princess Boo Boo. Let me get it up here real quick. So question, do you think the chips are a reference to the mark of the beast?
Yes, I do.
All right. So there you go, Princess Boo Boo.
You have to keep in mind, a lot of this too, I get so frustrated with the currents of divination in these cult practices that go all the way back to the ancient times. Because if you go back to, well, there's so many things I could say about Revelation and how it's a script that people are trying to follow. But not only did they talk about the mark of the beast, they talk about 666. I sent an email to a friend of mine showing all the scientific correlations between 666 and the natural world, one of which, of course, is the element carbon. Carbon has 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and 6 electrons. And it is also part of a lot of these carbon chips. And you wouldn't be able to buy anything. They made you in the right hand. And where were they inserting a lot of these chips to make sure that they had control of people in the right hand? So again, it's just following a script. And as I stress over and over and over again, none of this is necessary to get us to an ideal world. None of it.
Yeah. Well, I have other questions, but I kind of feel like maybe we should, because we're already pushing 9:00. Okay. Segueing. Well, there's one more question I think that's relevant to what we're talking about. And then I think we could segue into transitioning from the scary, terrible, horrible things to what we could do to make it better. But this will be the last question that has to do with the negative, I think, for me anyway.
Okay.
Towards the end of the last interview, you were talking about currently that there's like 2 sects of ancient from when they were starting all of this crap a long time ago that are currently kind of fighting each other. And we were already kind of talking about that, like the positive and negative. But I think you specifically had like what those groups are, like what they're called, or if they're specific ET beings, or I don't know if there was any other part of this other than it being kind of the devil versus the goodness. What is there like some other part that's being played here, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yes, and this topic all by itself is once again so huge that it can occupy a tremendous amount of time. But again, to recap that aspect of the discussion. So as my exposition in the previous podcast was suggesting, there was a part of Atlantis that went dark. And when it did, darkness fled Atlantis in various cult forms that ended up in Ireland and in the British Isles, specifically with the Druids. Now, at that point, the Druid group, who I can sometimes call the Knights group, was situated in Britain, and they viewed themselves as people who were part of this Dark Atlantean group that wanted to take over the world. But then the Sumer group got started, and this was a reptile group and they wanted to take over the world. So again, the Knight group sent their emissaries southward to find out what was going on with the Sumer group. And I believe, again, that the Knight group was represented by those called the Chaldeans. Now, the Chaldeans showed up in Babylon and they fought the Babylonians at first, but eventually, I believe, they merged and became magicians teaching their dark esoterica to some of the Sumerians who were there. The headquarters for a lot of this dark activity in Egypt was a temple at Karnak in Thebes. And I believe there, a lot of the high priests, the word for high priest was the Habaru, which eventually gets transliterated into the Hebrews. So I don't actually think that the Hebrews are Asian. The way that I look at the research, Hebrews are simply the high priests, and the high priests were the Chaldeans, and the Chaldeans were from Britain. And I know that some of the research does indicate that physically they didn't look like the natives of Egypt at all, and I have citations for that in my work. But in any case, they formed an uneasy alliance with each other. There was clearly you can't beat them, join them kind of thing. We know this also with Woden/Odin. He was a military leader in the Navy from that Frisian group that had the colony in the North Sea. And according to the Orlinda book, Freya, he was an extremely positive character in the story, was trying to nurture the Atlantean colony in the North Sea positively. But Woden was seduced by all the power that the dark side had and went dark. So a number of these Atlantean groups, the Druids and eventually the Knights, vied along with the reptiles for control of this planet. So there's a thread, and it's a really long thread to go through. I'll try to race through 1,000 years in a few seconds. But basically, the Druids and the Essenes are the same thing. There are countless practices, correlations between the Essenes and the Druids. And of course, Jesus is tied to the Essenes undeniably. Bushby's research indicates quite openly that Jesus was a Druid. Now, you can fast forward a little bit in time to the time of King Arthur. So I know that this is controversial for some people who haven't heard this type of thing before. Some people, I'm sure, have heard this type of thing before. But Jesus never died on the cross. And he survived and lived in England for a while and spawned a bloodline, which lasted through the centuries and eventually leads to the real King Arthur in England. And then a little bit after that, we have the time period of the Merovingian kings in France. So this is still this knight bloodline going through time. And they're still vying with a reptile group. And then a lot of things become massively messed up at the time of Charlemagne, who's actually also one of the darkest characters in all of history. Hold on just a second. I just have to drink a little water.
Yeah, no problem. So real quick, while you're getting a sip, before we get caught up going down this story, I just want to take a step back and see, because I have heard of some of this before, but do we have any, what are the sources that talk about, as opposed to the Bible and research that's been done by, that's been done by historians on the origins of the historical Jesus and stuff like that, compared to the theory that these are coming from Britain and places like that?
Oh, shoot. I mean, there's just so much of it. I mean, Bushby really did a spectacular job. He wrote a book called The Bible Fraud, and then he has tons of evidence that he presents all by himself. Mm-hmm. But beyond what Bushby presents, if people just don't want to rely on a single source, which is always a great idea when you do research,
yeah,
you have to look at how, what I would call, and again, I don't mean to offend anybody, but have to look at how these characters are created. Because when I look back at the ancient writings, I see a number of character creations. This is, again, something that you would normally never have tons of time to get into, but I will just mention that, for example, you have historical figures, or supposedly historical figures, like King Solomon, King David. And then historians are saying, okay, well, wait a minute, we'd like to get some accuracy as to who these people were, and we can't figure it out. because when we look back, we can't find a King Solomon, we can't find a King David. We think they maybe made them up. But there actually is a scholar who did figure out what was going on. His name is Ahmed Osman, and he found out exactly who King Solomon was, King Amenhotep III, who was the father of Akhenaten. And Akhenaten is largely a source for the character of Moses. He's a composite character, a composite of Akhenaten and Ezra, who lived 1,000 years later. Several of these characters in these stories are composites that are part of cult formation. So Jesus, the character in the Bible, is a composite of a multitude of people, but primarily he's a composite of, I would say, about 5 different people. So there's an individual by the name of Yeshua, who is probably like the main historical Jesus that most people would think of. He had a twin brother that was known to Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, who both put the twins into their paintings.
And I think that's pretty accepted now by historians too, that he had a brother James, if I'm not mistaken, correct? Or something like that, or that, I don't know what the name would be, but that's what I've heard.
Right. Okay. Well, in Bushby's accounting, the twin brother is named Judas Crestus.
Okay.
Now, Jesus also had other brothers that were not twins, which is a whole other story. But in any case, you have, as going into this composite character, Yeshua, his twin brother, and next extremely major figure, and this is the one that you can just do a deep dive on, and you can just like forget about Tony Bushby if you're uncomfortable with his writing. Just do your own deep dive on this character, Apollonius of Tyana. Okay, you dive deeply into Apollonius of Tyana, you will see tons of things. You will see the source material for a lot of where Jesus himself came from. He's another one of the very major characters. By the way, Apollonius of Tyana is actually in the New Testament, St. Paul. So when you keep hearing about St. Paul writing letters to this person in that group, you're actually hearing about Apollonius of Tyana.
So we're talking about,
in many cases.
So we're talking about the apostle?
Yes, St. Paul. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. That was actually Apollonius of Tyana. And as Bushby also points out, Apollonius of Tyana, along with Joseph of Arimathea, along with the Yeshua character who I just mentioned, all 3 were initiates in the mystery school in Egypt. And I talked a little bit about the importance of the mystery schools in Egypt. So many figures in history that we think were independently coming up with these great ideas, they were initiates in the mystery school in Egypt. Pythagoras was a major one. As a matter of fact, Apollonius of Tyana was sort of representative of the Pythagorean school. And there was a rivalry with a Promethean cult. And they were vying for followers. So one of the unfortunate things that happened mixed into this story is that when people were trying to make their stories more tantalizing so they could get more recruits, is some of the miracles got bumped up a little bit. So my guy can perform greater miracles than your guy. And so there's a life of Apollonius of Tyana called, it's written by a fellow named Philostratus. So how much of that story is historically accurate? We don't know. We just know that the story was written, and it sounds like he was doing all kinds of incredibly spectacular things like Jesus was. So another part of the composite was the source material for a figure in India, Krishna. So I think Bushby said about, 346 story elements of the life of Jesus were swiped directly from Krishna. So you're also reading about Krishna when you're reading about Jesus. So in addition to all of that, I have yet another Jesus character who probably is the most positive of all of them, and he's the one that almost nobody's ever heard of. He comes out of the Orlinda book, and to me, he's actually the one I can most relate to out of all the different beings that might have fed into Jesus. Some of the things that he said, he didn't preach celibacy. He preached moderation. That you should just control your passions. You don't avoid them altogether. He talked about the value of hard work. That you can be as rich as you want to be if you will work by. He called it scratching the earth, and what he meant by scratching the earth was plow your fields, plant your crops. You'll have food, you'll have water. treat other people well, and your life will go well. So again, I tell that story, citing the full material in Hidden History of Humanity. But again, Jesus was this composite character. Anyway, going back to Charlemagne, though, this bloodline keeps going on until it reaches Charlemagne, at which point there occurs what I call the Charlemagne scramble. What I mean by that is that the Merovingian kings, who seem to be part of this bloodline from Yeshua that went from Britain through King Arthur, eventually to these Merovingian kings who were living in France, everything gets scrambled with Charlemagne. And I think the reason for that is because my research indicates Charlemagne was not a legitimate part of the Merovingian bloodline. I think that he was an insertion from the reptiles. And when Charlemagne reproduces, he goes to town on his women. He had tons of concubines, tons of heirs,
and a lot of children.
Now,
yes.
When
so much so that I think through DNA testing and stuff now, there's a significant amount of people who are alive today who can trace their ancestry back to Charlemagne.
And I'm going to develop that point strongly here in a microsecond. So some people will say that on planet Earth right now, there's 3 primary spots of evil. 1, Washington, D.C. 2, the city of London, a city within a city in London. It's kind of sovereign. And 3, Vatican City, which is a sovereign city within a city. But when you look back in time to when the city of London became its own independent city within a city in London, who did that? That would be King Alfred the Great. And interestingly, when you look back to the lineage of U.S. presidents, you will find that nearly all of them are related to 2 people: Charlemagne, Alfred the Great.
Wow.
Well, we do know that there's been a lot of presidents connected through bloodlines. I mean, it's not. I mean, that is something that that is pretty concrete evidence there, which kind of goes back to what we were talking about before about people who exist behind the scenes that control more than what I think the average person would like to believe they controlled.
Right. So just racing up to the present day, trying to bot through all this, because I just sort of uncovered this, and it's a research trail that other people can follow. But after the Merovingian kings fell, there arose a new knights group, which I'm sure many people are familiar with, called the Knights Templar.
Mm-hmm.
And then they ran afoul of ruling leadership in France and were kind of expunged. But interestingly, in their shadow arose a new religious sect called the Waldensians. And the Waldensians were interesting because they are apparently the forerunners of the Protestants. And the Protestant Reformation seems to be a resurrection of the clash between the knights and the banksters, between the Druids and the reptiles. So the Protestant Reformation is largely driven between this clash of who's going to control everybody. And of course, again, you look at the United States, you see a major city called New York. What is New York named after again? Oh, yeah, it's called the city of York in England, where King Alfred the Great reigned. That's how New York got its name. It's the New York. And how many U.S. presidents were Protestant? Look it up.
Well, every U.S. president has been Protestant except for John F. Kennedy, if I'm not. Oh, and now, and Biden is Catholic too, if I'm not mistaken, right?
So there is a huge. Biden claims to be Catholic.
Yeah, and then John F. Kennedy was Catholic, and then every other president has claimed to be Christian of some sort. You could talk about Jefferson and stuff and being a deist, but yeah, for the most part.
Yes. So again, these clashes have gone through all time, but there's one group that is the reptile bankster group was much more psychotic. I mean, they're basically trying to obliterate this entire planet and kill as many people as possible as part of devil worship. And another group is more interested in less death as long as they come out on top. And, basically when Jenny, you were asking about these groups that were vying for each other, we have one that's extremely dark and another group, which I call gray, because they're not saints and they're not wholly positive.
Mm-hmm.
But, there have a number of people working for them who are positive and they actually believe that they're positive. They just don't know what's above them, I don't think. So that's my view on it.
So we do have a good question that CMC brought up here that makes a good point, just for some clarification, which is we talked about the connection to England, we're not talking about England, the nation. We're talking, I think we're talking about the landmass of Britain, the British Isles there. So the question essentially was, if Jesus is a amalgamation of these different Krishna and Yeshua and these different entities, then what was going on? Like, who was possibly from Europe or from the British Isles, as opposed to these other figures? Was it Yeshua? Was it Krishna? What was going on there? Is there any clarification for that one?
Not quite sure what you're getting for the clarification
like if,
for Europe.
Like there was a bunch of different, like you're saying, there's a bunch of different characters that kind of get smushed into what we know as Jesus. But then there's like, which, like, was it Yeshua was the actual one that we know was spending time, that went to England, I think is what his question is.
Okay. In that case, yes, that is definitely Yeshua. Because there's videos you can watch. Some people are just so excited to have this as part of their history. They do videos because they really want you to know that. And basically, a lot of what this has to do with, honestly, was the tin trade, because tin was an important metal that was traded in the ancient world, and Joseph of Arimathea was part of that tin trade, and Yeshua participated in that. So when he went back to England, it was part of the tin trade, and in Bushby's writing, he took over the Druids when he returned, and had a bloodline. He had like several different wives and several different children that came after that. But yes, it was definitely Yeshua was the one who was in England.
Okay.
So what is the connection? Because I've heard this theory before, specifically with Joseph of Arimathea. Can you explain that part a little bit more about where he's coming from and what he's doing? Because isn't that the kind of the historical connection that people try to draw to Yeshua, if I'm not mistaken?
Okay, so Joseph of Arimathea is basically Joseph of Joseph and Mary. So, yes. I mean, we're talking about the same person, a mystery school initiate. So, again, these aren't just like everyday traders, too. I just mentioned the tin trade. But again, Joseph of Arimathea was a mystery school initiate. So was Jesus, Yeshua. I mean, he was initiated in the mystery school in Egypt. So and they went through the 3-day trial. I mean, we're talking intense stuff in the mystery school. You go through a 3-day trial. And at the very end of that trial, you carry an Ankh cross up through the Grand Gallery in the Great Pyramid, and you go into the king's chamber, and they give you psychotropic drugs, and then you lie down in the coffin, and you have an out-of-body experience where your soul leaves your body, and you again experience theophany, which is interaction with beings on higher frequencies, positive or negative. The way that the mystery schools were being run at that time, I view all that training is mostly negative, so I'm assuming that they interacted with negative people. And again, when I do think this is probably one of the more accurate statements in the Bible, of which there probably aren't too many. But one of the things that Yeshua was supposedly said was, I came not to destroy, but to fulfill the traditions of which he had learned about. Now, he's referring, of course, to the traditions that are represented in the Torah, scroll of Judaism. But none of those traditions are really positive. One of the things I point out to folks about in relation to the Bible from the very beginning is the story of Cain and Abel, a story which, by the way, is much darker than what most people think. I'm not sure if people are even just paying attention to that. I mean, I know that people think they basically know the story of Cain and Abel, but again, go back and carefully read that. It says that Abel slaughtered an animal, and God loved that, thought that was great. And then Cain brought plants, and God said, no, that's not good. That is not good at all. You have to kill. I want blood. Then Cain kills Abel. Kills him. Now, again, this is supposed to be the great God of justice, right? So you're thinking, okay, well, he just murdered somebody. So if this is the God, he's probably going to be really upset that somebody just murdered somebody. And he's probably going to, exact some kind of punishment. Because this is supposed to be the God of righteousness, right?
He's going to be smited, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And what does God say to actually say to Cain? He says, Cain is worried that other people are going to hunt him down, which is kind of interesting because there's supposed to be hardly any human beings in the world at that time, because human was to be a new new species. I don't know what other human beings he was supposed to be so afraid of that we're going to hunt him down. But he's concerned that other people are going to hunt him down. And what does God say to him? I will protect you. I will make sure that your murder, you get away scot-free. And isn't that kind of a strange way to go about things? And again, this story is much worse than that, because the Bible has the edited version of the story. Now, in R.A. Boulet's Flying Serpents and Dragons, he uncovered something called the Pseudepigraphica in relation to the Bible and the story of Cain and Abel. And according to him, the original story actually says that Cain didn't just murder Abel, he ate him.
Mm.
And then God says, I'll make sure that no one bothers you for doing that. Okay, I'll protect you. And that's kind of strange.
That's pretty interesting, because it's almost like going back to, like, we know, like, not to make a comparison, but the fairy tales, the original Snow White and Cinderella are so much darker. They're the original writings than what we know. And it can only, speculate to really what some of the original documents and versions of this would have said too, if that's already so wild. Before we keep going, because we're getting pretty deep into the conversation here, I want to kind of reset a little bit. Tonight's guest is Tim Kelly, and we are talking about, we're talking about a lot of things. One, his book, The Hidden History of Humanity. The links are posted at the top of the chat. So if you're interested in looking into any of the things that we're discussing tonight, you can go check out his books and his webpage there that are linked at the top. And for those of you who are listening later on the podcast, I'll have that link in the description below. So make sure you check that out. And also, I'll take a quick second to say, if you're curious about who is going to be on the show coming up, you can always check out thewitchinghourspodcast.com. And when you go there, you can find a calendar with all the upcoming shows, a link to their merch store, all those wonderful things. There's past episodes embedded right there, so you can go check out and find out what's been going on in our little neck of the woods. So getting back to it, we had a question here from Applecat. Is this ritual that we were talking about in the pyramids connected to the Egyptian death rituals described in the Book of the Dead?
Slightly, not 100% overlap there. But again, a lot of these, the Egyptian Book of the Dead goes a long ways back. And there's a lot to that. Busby says that the original title was The Book of the Master of Hidden Places, which certainly sounds a lot even darker than Book of the Dead. But yeah, Bushby has uncovered pretty much the full rite. He describes it in Secret in the Bible. So if you ever want to read that book, you can read pretty much what all the steps were. You started off going into the Sphinx, and you went through. I often tell people the fraternities of today are an echo of the ancient mystery schools. It's basically, what all are you willing to do to become part of our group?
Yeah.
So
everything goes back to these secret societies.
Yep. There were passwords, handshakes, threats of torture if you revealed any of the information. But yeah, there was a lot of attuning, as I call it, when you were going through the ritual. And I think the attuning had to do with knowing that an out-of-body experience was coming up at the end of it, because that was tuning where you were going to go. You had to do some pretty gruesome stuff. I believe that the original Atlantean version of this was far more positive and didn't have all this dark junk that was in there.
Yeah. You could do out of body stuff without having to, eat dogs or whatever.
Exactly. And honestly, at the very beginning, Bushby calls them sacred sacrifices. I don't know what the heck he's talking about, sacred sacrifices. Why do you have to kill animals? Just to become enlightened? It's just
not necessary.
You stood on a pile of corpses at the very beginning, which is,
fun.
Yeah. And then you move forward through this thing. And then at one point you do some kind of like autopsy or dissection. Also sounds very strange. And, at one point you're threatened with death. They hand you these cups, and one of them's poisoned, one's not. Drink now. Is that really necessary to go through all of that? And then,
absolutely not.
There are other things where you're like trapped in a dark corridor and thinking that you might never get out when your lamp goes out, and just it's a very twisted way of trying to tune consciousness. And again, at the end of all this, at the climax of it, you have this out of body experience where your soul leaves your body and encounters beings on other frequencies. So these were the traditions that all of these people were a part of. Joseph of Arimathea, Yeshua, Apollonius of Tyana. A lot of these people viewed themselves as extremely important people who were guiding ignorant, lesser humanity forward with their own visions of what was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And as I state emphatically in my writing, there was an original positive path that was offered in Atlantis that was rejected, and this is what we get: this alternative stuff.
Yeah.
And CMC, I just want to say, if it's something you're interested in, you want to try to check out, I would say, because I've heard of this topic a couple different times. Once with the late great Art Bell. Joseph of Arimathea would be the place to start with that, because that's someone we actually do have some historical, that we do have some historical facts about, that it's a little easier to dig into and then kind of see where it takes you if you're interested. Did you have any other questions about that topic, Jenny?
I think I'm ready to stop talking about the terrible, horrible things.
Well, it seems like no matter what we go to, we're going to get in there, because I wanted to talk a little bit more. Last time we kind of talked about Atlantis a little bit. We've talked about it a little bit tonight. I think last time we were discussing some of the Atlantean things, Tim. We were talking about the Bimini Road and kind of the idea of Atlantis being in that area of the world, the Caribbean, Bermuda area, off the coast, off the eastern coast of Florida. Was that correct last time?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I just didn't want. I didn't want to have it wrong and say something that you didn't agree with. My question is, I've been kind of going down the rabbit hole a little bit on the idea of the Eye of the Sahara and how interesting that's been matching up as well, because I've always thought the Bimini Road and stuff was really interesting. But have you followed any of that, and what do you think are the possibilities, or have you come across anything of what was going on with what they're calling the Eye of the Sahara?
Yes, I mean there's tons of stuff. So again, the major capital of Atlantis I call Poseidonis, because that's what it's called in the research that I've done, and that was the one that was located to the west, in the heart of the Bermuda Triangle in the Bimini area, where all the strange phenomenon are. Now, there's also a story of a city that was more to the east called Tritonus. So that would have been pretty similar to Poseidonis. I believe that would have been more in what was called the Aryan region. I personally find some interesting correlations between the term Aryan for the island and Ares, the god of war. How much of a connection there, I'm not 100% sure, but we do know that the colonies of Atlantis kept going. They didn't just stop when they got to the end of the island in the Atlantic. They went into Africa, and they went into North Africa, specifically in Mauritania. I'm not sure what extent you've covered, or if you're even aware of the researcher who discovered a city which he believes is a perfect match for what he wants us to think of as the city of Atlantis, that was found in Mauritania. But he shows you, I guess it's called the Ricotte structure, but he shows you the stones and how the colors of the stones match up and everything else. And he wants you to think that that's the Atlantis. And so I get asked that question a lot. Have I heard of this guy? What do I think? And what I think is there was a global initiative to try and teach humanity. There would have been 8 primary points. I do think 3, at least, of the Great Pyramids were probably completed. The one that, of course, we all know is in Giza. Again, just go 90 degrees west, and you would hit Poseidonis, the capital of Atlantis, where I believe the second completed Great Pyramid was. Go 90 degrees west again, and you would hit where the third completed Great Pyramid was, which was in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, on the continent that also sank beneath the sea. I have references from ancient documents that do talk about learned masters who were basically teaching people a path to enlightenment around what appears to be a Great Pyramid. there's a very characteristic aspect of pyramid tech, which can be confused with a comet. Bushby goes into this extensively. It's a huge, deep, esoteric and exoteric topic called the rainbow serpent. It's one of the most significant ideas related to Great Pyramid. A lot of people have uncovered aspects of the functioning of the Great Pyramid, but you don't fully understand its operation until you integrate in this rainbow serpent concept. Again, it's a huge topic, but in any case, these are aspects of this civilization that was spread globally. It was not just on the continent that was in the Atlantic Ocean. There were legacy colonies, again, all over the Mediterranean basin. Some of those would have had cities in rings. There are some legacy city in rings that appeared to much lesser degree of magnificence in Mesoamerica. But if you go into South America, you start, especially as you get close to one of those major grid points, which would have been in Argentina. You will see increasing tales of what appears to be Atlantean tech. And one of the most significant aspects of that, these are in the stories that are accounted by Harold Wilkins in his book on South America. Actually, probably has more than one book on South America. But again, I have a specific reference in my own Hidden History of Humanity. But he describes an individual who ended up in what appears to be a major Atlantean city. There was a giant tower, and there is, again, a significant aspect of Atlantean tech, the eternal lamp. And again, my research indicates the eternal lamps probably were a form of limestone. It gave off a cold, phosphorescent, full spectrum light that could grow plants and was the most efficient form of lighting that there can be. And I can go into any aspect of these topics that you want to get into.
All right. So Applecat had a statement here, which I think kind of summarizes it, at least to a certain extent, which, I think gets confused because a lot of times in the tales we have Atlantis, just in pop culture itself, tends to be thought of as just this city. But, Applecat said, so Atlantis was a multinational empire surrounding the Atlantic. And I think that's probably a better viewpoint from what we're talking about here. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly look at this from the full perspective of all the information that I have, which is, again, beings from the stars, from the Pleiades star system coming down, trying to enlighten our species globally, that there were 8 major centers, one of which would have been Atlantis, which was in a great geographical location for abundance and, extremely fertile land. There were a number of volcanoes on that particular island, which made the soils very fertile, as Plato describes directly in his dialogue. He's talking about they grew every kind of food. It was extremely nutritious. People were very healthy, happy when they were living there. And again, this was something that was a goal was to spread this culture around the entire planet. Yeah. As for it being an empire, going back to a significant part of the timeline, which I believe Plato is referring to when he talks about his history of Atlantis, Poseidon mated with a mortal woman named Cleito, spawning the line of demigods that get started at approximately 30,000 BC. This is about the time period from which Cro-Magnons date to. So I don't necessarily view it so much as an empire. I know that it's an effort to spread a positive civilization around the world. And when demigods choose darkness, they start becoming much more militaristic. And once they've gone fully to the dark side, they're on a path of conquest from there. And at that point, they've really lost their way.
Just out of curiosity, because I knew, and it's been a while since I've taken since I've been in some of my Greek history classes. I know that Plato discussed and kind of gave an explanation of what Atlantis looked like. From my studies, that was coming from some of his teachers because Atlantis would have existed way before Plato. Do you remember who any of those scholars were that Plato? I used to know the name of the scholar that he learned it from. Do you know that off the top of your head?
Solon.
Yeah, there you go. Solon. Yep. So that's knowledge that's being passed down through the Greeks at that point about Atlantis CMC. And then I wanted to bring up one other question here that CMC Air Boss, our good friend here, brought up. So the question is, how would the scholars of Greece know about Atlantis if it was not close, if it wasn't in the Mediterranean region, but it was on the other side of the Atlantic?
Fantastic question. And it's so easily answered. Hold on just a sec, though. I got to get some more water.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, that's a lot of talking. The throat gets parched pretty quick.
I'm getting thirsty and you're doing all the talking.
Okay, so again, these people are not working in isolation. Plato was an initiate in the mystery school, just like Joseph of Arimathea, just like Yeshua. He too was initiated in Egypt. These people are all getting their information from the same source. As a matter of fact, when some people, start getting a little pushy on the idea of, oh, this is really Plato's concoction, I remind them of an individual by the name of Crantor, Krantor.
Yes, I'm familiar.
Now, as he went to Egypt and he saw the same story of Atlantis inscribed in Egypt. They got their information from Egypt. And as a matter of fact, there's another key part of the story of Atlantis, which had to do with the warring group that left Atlantis to conquer the rest of the world. And there was an Atlantean legacy colony that was situated where? In what would become Greece. Only this Greece dates back to 9,000 plus BC. Now, at that point, this Atlantean legacy colony, one of the groups you can look up in relation to this, they're called the Pelasgians, Pelasgians. This is probably the spearhead of this particular Atlantean colony. Now, they say that this colony was headed by the Atlantean Athena. Okay, so in ancient Egypt, they said that they had a record of who the Greeks called the ancient Athena. This story does get slightly confusing because that happens. I'll explain that in a second. But in the ancient Egyptian account, they called this same woman by the name of Neith, Neith. And apparently when Solon went over to get the story of Atlantis that was then passed on to Plato, one of the things that Solon was told by the priests in Egypt was the Egyptians were eternally grateful to the Greeks because Athena and her forces defended positive Atlantean colonies from the Dark Atlanteans who had gone on the warpath, and that without Athena, it's possible that the world would have been completely lost when the Dark Atlanteans went on the warpath. But as the tale concludes, supposedly, not only does Atlantis fall in the common storm, but again, I'm just going by what's in the tale. They say that Athena and her entire army were swallowed up by the earth in a catastrophe, and that ancient Athena was lost. And I was mentioning a complication in the story. I just always feel compelled to get this stuff out there because I know that people could stumble on this on their own, and then they would probably ask me questions about it later. One of the inflations that takes place is Athena and Minerva. They sort of become interchangeable, and this, unfortunately, is a muddling of history. So in the Orlinda book, it's told not only of the origins of Woden and Thor, but also the origins of Minerva. Because when you look closely at the tale that's told of this woman who went to the area that was Athens and founded the ancient Greece that most people are much more familiar with, this correlates to this woman Minerva, who eventually, over time, gets mixed with this ancient Athena. So once again, we have a composite character, Athena, who is a mixture of an ancient Atlantean who defended this Atlantean legacy colony at about 9,000 plus BC, is conflated with a Minerva who came from a Frisian colony in the Denmark-Holland area and helped to found Athens as part of an Atlantean tradition. And this is like way later, like 1600 BC or something like that.
Interesting. You got anything for that, Jenny?
No, I think that answered answering CMC's question.
Yeah, there we go. So
yeah,
So, I mean, definitely. Well, one thing I will say about this is, for sure, some of this, not only, from your research, Tim, that you've done on here, but on some of these topics, especially the idea of Plato and Solon, and going to the theory of Atlantis and stuff like that, coming from out of Egypt, is even backed by mainstream academic historians, because I actually learned that in some of my ancient history classes. So I mean, these are the idea of this coming out of Egypt, and the idea that this information is being passed down through Greek scholars, whether they're secret society, cults that are kind of going on, or whether they're scholars. I mean, that information for sure, we know academically was being passed down.
Well, again, I keep stressing the mystery schools because they're essential to the story. Thales, the very first philosopher, was initiated in a mystery school in Egypt. Aristotle was initiated in a mystery school in Egypt. Pythagoras was initiated in the mystery school in Egypt. I mean, again, all of these people were initiated in the same place. This is why they have this information.
And just to double check, because I want to make sure I'm not getting it wrong, because like when I learned it, we use the term mystery cults. Are we talking about the same thing essentially?
There are variations of it that has spread through space and time. But what I often stress over and over again is that there was a positive version that was an Atlantean version. And then there was the Reptile-Scianian War, fought at approximately 3400 BC, when the Sumerians ruled Egypt from the shadows. And they found out what was being taught in the mystery schools, and they corrupted it. So what's being taught in the mystery schools from then on is a pale shadow of what was originally taught. And again, I try to reconstruct what was originally taught in my book, The Math Wizard.
Okay, well, there's two ways I want to go with this. Two things that we've kind of bumped into. I'm not sure which way I want to go. Earlier, you were talking about the demigods and the Atlanteans being demigods. When we're talking about this specifically, is there a connection there with the Nephilim, or is that something different?
Well, I wanted to sort that out as best as I possibly could, and I offer the reader multiple accounts. The most straightforward account of the origins of the Nephilim comes from books like the Book of Jubilees and the Book of Enoch. These are Sumerian accounts, which were pretty straightforward. It basically talks about reptiles coming down and finding woman favorable, and they talk about an oath that was taken. There are two major mountains in Middle East and where a lot of these reptiles settled in. Of course, people will be pretty familiar with those. Mount Hermon is the most famous, and Mount Oreb / Sinai. Sinai, by the way, is named after a Sumerian moon god named Sin. That's where Sinai comes from. And these two mountains, by the way, I found in Greek mythology were transmogrified. So basically, if you go atop Mount Hermon and you go atop Mount Sinai, you'll find a lot of amazing things. And if you go atop Mount Olympus and Mount Othrys, which were supposedly in the Titanomachy, described in a famous poem, you'll find nothing whatsoever. And the reason why you have two mountains in both stories is they're supposed to both represent the same two mountains. So in other words, the Mount Olympus and Mount Othrys don't really represent anything other than Mount Hermon and Mount Sinai that were part of this same story. It got altered and shared everywhere. But in Greek mythology, we have characters that I try to take a closer look at, especially in relation to a number of events, because I find the characters in mythology are all tied to one another. They put us into a ballpark of genetic modification. I put all those clues and assemble them so that the reader can form their own judgment based on seeing all the clues in the same place. So what clues do you see in the same place? In the Titanomachy, you have a younger generation of gods going up against an older generation of gods. Wish I had time to clarify that story is not as messed up as it really should be. But in any case, in that story, after Zeus defeats the forces of darkness, who does he face? He faces a serpentine giant by the name of Typhon. Well, that sure sounds like a reptile coming to mess with things. And then if you follow the trail of Typhon and see what he was involved with, he had a mate. What was her name? Echidna. So when you look up Echidna, you start seeing this being who was half reptile, possibly half human. And then, connected to this same story, you have two other characters, one of which is Prometheus, and the other is Pandora. And in the story of Pandora, depending on which version of the myth you're getting into, you start hearing about a creation story of a new species. Now, it depends on which version of the myth that you're looking at. Some people will say that, well, there were no women, and Pandora was involved in the creation of women.
Oh, you're breaking us up on us a little bit there, Tim.
Okay. But I think the correct interpretation of the myth is that Pandora's box is supposed to be a code of the womb, letting loose all the trouble in the world, feeding a new corrupted blood, which may very well be genetic, because we do hear about reptile especially in the area.
All right, Tim, you're kind of breaking up. We were able to catch some of that, but it started breaking up kind of bad there. So I don't know. Hopefully that'll clear itself up. Sometimes it does. I'll go ahead and, while we're working with that real quick, kind of reset one more time. We're coming down. We got about 20 minutes left in the program. So if you have your any questions, make sure you get them across. We've already had a bunch of wonderful questions, and so we 100% appreciate everyone in chat and the wonderful discussions that are going on and questions that are being raised. Make sure you check out, if you're interested in any of this and you want to find out more about what we've been talking about tonight, the link is at the top of the chat. You can go in there and go purchase the book and read about it, where there's be much more in-depth discussion about it. You can go visit Tim's webpage and check out a whole bunch of stuff. You go there and you can spend you can probably go on a good nighttime deep dive right there on Tim's webpage. The link is at the top. And if you're listening later in the podcast, you can find it down below in the description. I'll have it listed there. All right, Tim, do we still have you with us?
You definitely still have me.
Okay, there we go.
Clear,
yeah, we can hear you. You sound clear as a bell now.
Yes.
Okay, great.
So we did have a question. We had a question from Applecat. Last time you were on, you did talk about giants a lot, but Applecat was specifically asking if there were giants on Atlantis as well.
Yes, definitely. So, of course, the Pleiadians who created humanity were themselves giants when they arrived. So the demigods, when they were created, were also giants. So there would have been a multitude of giants right there. But then there would be more giants. The Cyanians, a species I talked about, the blue-skinned, probably amphibians at the beginning, were also giants. In Bushby's writing, which is kind of interesting in relation to Osiris, sometimes when you are going through a lot of these stories and mythology, you'll hear about a god, and you think of it, okay, so, basically this is a myth that somebody concocted that, probably has no real existence. Osiris had a casket. So how many times do you put a fake mythological god into an actual tomb?
Yeah, it doesn't happen often.
So by measuring the length of the tomb, we were able, Bushby actually gives you specific measurements. It all depends on what value you accept for the cubit, but depending on what value you accept for the cubit, regardless of which one you accept in the range of values that are considered valid, it makes Osiris a giant, so which makes Cyanians giants. So they would have been giants on the earth. And the reptiles themselves, based on measurements that we have from so many different things, from accounts in the Bible, from the accounts of the Philistines and the Rephaim giants that were in the Levant. Again, as I mentioned before, when they went over there to do recon before the Rephaim Horate War, the regular sized people said, we look like grasshoppers to them. So there were tons of giants. And after the reptile Cyanian War, as I sort of recounted before, according to Bushby's account, the followers of Horus, called Horites, apparently represented a new form of humanity, which appears to me to be a reptile cyanian crossbreeding that also resulted in giants. And how many of these different hybrids of giants existed, I have no idea. I mean, I just keep uncovering more and more of them. But as I said before, many of these did end up in North America, where they have been found all over the place. There's a book by Richard Dewhurst that talks about the mound builders that were all over North America. So clearly, these giants were all over North America, and again, at a very startlingly late date. They were probably still widespread in North America as late as 1300 AD.
Giants have been something that, well, obviously, for my name, something that I've always been interested in. I was really kind of used to look into the idea of frost giants and all kinds of things. It's always been a very fascinating, the mound builders in North America, and the idea that these bones that were found in, what's today the United States were kind of absconded away by the Smithsonian. But it does bring up an interesting questions. If we had giants that big in the historical record, what happened to the bones? Like we found, it's rare to, I mean, one thing that people don't realize is, or at least I don't think enough people realize the significance of, is when you find like an ancient human bone or an ancient dinosaur bone, it really is a rare find for it to turn into a fossil and to exist that long. But you would think at that point in time, we would be coming across more giant bones for something that massive. Do you have any thoughts on that specifically?
Well, tons. Of course, the subtitle of Dewhurst's book is "And the Great Smithsonian Cover-Up." So, I mean, generally speaking, when people are finding these bones in the field, what do? They call the authorities. And so who do the authorities lead them to? Well, the people who want the bones covered up. So they show up, they make the bones disappear. What are the stories like? Well, we were transporting them at sea and there was an incident. They went overboard. They're gone. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Something else that's really interesting in this regard. I've gotten a little frustrated sometimes with these stories of this empire. The people who are constructing this theory don't seem to be doing it too scientifically, but they keep trying to talk about Tartaria and all these repressed and vanished giants and stuff like that. One of the things that they bring up as part of their story is kind of interesting in a maybe not the sense that they were thinking of, which is the number of major city fires in North America between, let's say, 1890 and 1920. Now, part of the reason why I find those fires so interesting is when you read through Dewhurst's book, you see newspaper articles that were talking openly, just directly to the public. We found giant bones here, found giant bones there. Everybody was finding them. Presidents of the United States were openly talking about finding the giant bones. Mm-hmm. Okay? This is how common this information was spread at that time. And then we have these mysterious major city fires in tons of major cities. And after that, coincidentally, we don't hear anything more about the giants. All the textbooks are rewritten. There's like no more talk of them anymore. So I happen to think that's probably not a coincidence.
Yeah. It's something that I think has been talked about less, even by people who talk about these sort of things that we're talking about tonight. I did notice like a few years ago, there was like a show that came on that was talking about, trying to find, what happened to the giant bones and stuff like that. But it used to be something that had a little more traction than it does now. I feel like even in the circles that talk about the things that shall not be discussed, giants have become a little bit more taboo than they used to be.
Yes, I have no explanation other than that there's a concerted effort to make sure that we never fully understand our past. The giants are one aspect of it. I just wish that, again, what bothers me even more than the fact that the giants have been covered up is that Atlantis has been so thoroughly erased. There's just, again, so many paths to freedom if we resurrect that technology.
Well, I have one more thing I want to bring up as we start getting towards the wind up time here in a little bit here. And that is, we've talked a lot about Atlantis. What is the connection between that? Is there a connection or is there a connection, or are they not connected? The idea of Atlantis, but then also Lemuria.
Lemuria. Okay, so again, Lemuria was in the Indian Ocean. That was primarily the Cyanians' main base. They had a different technology that was based on sound. They were not as advanced, or I hesitate to use the word intelligent. They were extremely intelligent people. They could do all kinds of amazing things. I think they had what I sometimes call Mercury superphysics, which is a whole other topic. But the Atlanteans were just experts. I mean, the full-blood Pleiadians had extreme elegance in all their technology, the efficiency of their engines, the efficiency of their lighting systems. Everything was just so much more advanced. But I believe that the Lemurians had a civilization where every aspect of the 10 basics of civilization was largely derived from sound. I explain exactly what I mean by that in Hidden History of Humanity so people can go through all of that. But that was largely a Cyanian base, as was Pan/Mu, whatever you want to call it, the continent that was in the Pacific Ocean. And the Pleiadians were, again, just far more advanced than the Cyanians were.
Interesting. Well, I was trying real hard, Tim, to give you plenty of time to talk about the positive stuff, but we just circled back around to all the negative stuff about 10 times. And then once again, we're at the very end of the show with no time to talk about all of the positive things that you like to talk about. So I guess last time you had mentioned there's like the 10, there's 10, I don't know what the right word is that you used, parts to the having paradise on Earth. I guess I'm trying to figure out where we can go with this without having to repeat and with little time. I guess this paint a picture for us, if you will. Let's just pretend that the paradise on Earth that you talk about with the 10-part system, let's just pretend it exists. What does the world look like?
The three main problems faced by humanity are poverty, disease, and war. All three would easily be obliterated, and they're obliterated by mastering those 10 basics of civilization, which are, in order, water, sanitation, food, shelter, power, heating, cooling, lighting, telecommunication, and transportation. We've uncovered enough of how the ancients did this, and there's degrees of doing it. There's sort of a primitive way I call the Calcarean way, which was probably developed by the Atlanteans. This is a civilization that is not as advanced as the full-blood Pleiadians, but is based on limestone. And I talk about how limestone is something that's readily accessible, and it's incredibly easy to work with. You take limestone, you chop it up, you put it in a kiln, you burn it. You can create from that limestone bricks, and you can create floors, and you can create bricks for walls, and you can put those stones into an arch, and you have a roof. If you need mortar to secure those stones together, you can get that from limestone, because that's where you get a very superior form of mortar. And the Romans had a variation incorporating volcanic ash, which made it incredibly strong. You can put lime onto the soil, and it will decay plant matter and turn stubborn soil into rich, fertile soil. So you have fantastic plants. And you have unlimited free energy that comes from the earth. It comes from the stars. This is a form of light resonance. I call it reluxance. It's sympathetic vibration of light energy from the stars combined with crystals that were able to energize and conduct that energy into power systems that operated at either 100% efficiency or greater than 100% efficiency. The lighting systems would be cold and phosphorescent, and they would increase your intelligence. They would allow plants to grow at night. All the plants would be incredibly healthy. No herbicides, no pesticides, no industrial fertilizers would be needed. You would use rock dust like nature does. Food would be unlimited. Temperature would be perfectly regulated. They were masters of static electricity, which could be used for a multitude of functions. And as I stress in all of my writing, there is unlimited potential for applications of static electricity. One of those is heating and cooling. Now, in conventional physics, we say that there's only 3 different ways of working in thermodynamics with heat. We call these radiation, conduction, and convection. What we will find is that the Atlanteans had actually worked with a 4th way, which a pioneer by the name of Oscar has worked with, and this is electrostatics. It's extremely efficient heating and cooling by correctly using positive and negative ions, which also purify the air in your room. I mean, many people probably have air purifiers that are based on ionics.
Mm-hmm.
So you use static electricity, you create ions, you purify the air, your rooms will not require dusting. You would have the end of poverty because obviously everyone would know how to build their own homes. They would have unlimited water. You can condense that from the air. You can obtain it using vibrations from the rock. You have perfect sanitation, just like nature does. Everything's 100% recyclable. A limestone home, of course, is 100% recyclable because limestone is part of what's called the limestone cycle. Beyond that, you have unlimited power from the energy from the earth, from the stars, from the air. You never have to pay an electric bill. You can use that for your heating and cooling, have your temperature at your home perfectly regulated. You have the cold phosphorescent light. You have telecommunications through the earth using the etheric grid. And you have transportation, which is based on these power systems and a lot of other aspects of those power systems, which we don't quite have time to get into. But it is quite clear that the Atlanteans had mastered these as well. And you understand all of this by understanding the full functioning of a Great Pyramid. Right now on the internet, there is a updated researcher. His name is Gregory Herman. So if you plug in his name into a keyword search on the internet, look at his insights into what all a Great Pyramid can do, and you will start to understand part of why I'm able to say some of what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Excellent.
It sounds wonderful. Can we just, can we just? And I just wanted to circle back to the beginning of the conversation because I've been hearing it so much and I've been thinking it myself that the whole thing about money, you were talking about the banksters at the very beginning, and it's like that's where it started. Like that's when that was the beginning of this this slavery, if you will, being a slave to the money to keep us down so that we have to rely on this false shit that we don't need.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to actually develop that point if I had the opportunity, but just to mention this idea, the origins of money traced back to Sumer. The first bank accounts were kept on clay tablets, cuneiform writing, wedge sticks on clay tablets. And what were those accounts measured in? Surpluses of wheat. Wheat is the origin of the first money. Now, in the Sumerian model, the surpluses of wheat that you grew were in the state storehouses. So there is the source of your bank account. So what does that tell you? That we could have stopped all of this at the very beginning if everyone had an independent homestead growing their own food. They would have had their own storehouses of calories. It could have formed the basis of a money system where everybody was literally growing their own money.
Yeah. So sum it all up, the 2 hours of conversation is money's the devil.
Yeah, which actually was another news story that you had talked to me about the other day. I said I was going to post and we didn't get to it. Maybe I'll have it in next time, the actual story. But you said they had discovered Jenny an even older writing than Sumer. We were talking about a little bit, but we didn't know what it is. They don't know what it is yet because they haven't been able to decipher it yet. But when she asked what it could be, we were just sitting around discussing it, sitting on the couch talking about this. And I said, more than likely, it was probably some kind of inventory record keeping. It would be awesome if it was some kind of like Epic of Gilgamesh story, but more than likely, it's like exactly. I had two,
Joe had 2 goats,
2 canisters of salt or wheat, or 2 goats. Yeah, and because that's the majority of what all this ancient writing is. It's just record keeping. Yeah, so maybe we'll find out one day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Once again, so many different topics, so much to wrap our minds around. To be honest with you, Tim, I don't think I really was understanding the last conversation we had till I listened to it again. So
it's a lot of information.
Yeah.
It's a lot of stuff to get into.
I'm so glad that I listened to it again because it's like my brain just didn't have enough time to process all of it. So I'm glad that you came back on to help, if nothing else, help me understand more of what you were talking about. And I hope that it was helping other people in the chat and etc. Kind of see like this some, I don't know, it's like a bigger, broader viewpoint, but also just once again showing that everything is connected, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
and
yeah,
sometimes it can be uncomfortable for people, and by no means am I saying that everything has to, that anyone has to listen to something and take that as, well, this is my new belief system or whatever. But it's interesting to have these conversations. It's interesting to see research that people that people are doing, because there is one thing that I do believe, and I do believe that that everything isn't what we've been told it was, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I think we can pretty much agree. I think most of us would agree on that. And so if everything isn't the way we were told that it was, then that means that we at least have to be willing to open our minds to the fact that things that we think are historically correct are not historically correct. And if one thing is not historically correct that's been backed up by the academic world and stuff like that, then you have to question how much of that has been. And so these conversations are important, and it's intriguing, and a lot of things that you can look into, and definitely always. I'm pretty into my late night 3 o'clock in the morning deep dives on looking stuff up. So it's a good place to get started. If you're curious about any of the things that we talked about with Tim tonight. Tim, we appreciate you being on the show and coming on here once again. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I hope I was helpful.
Yes. And remember, don't go anywhere, because we're going to do our fake finish, a real finish, and then we'll say bye to you.
So for all of you listening out there in podcast land and our little corner of the internet, thank you so much for downloading or listening to the podcast. It would be a huge help if you've listened all the way to the end here to give us a like and a review or sub or wherever you're at. Any of those things that help us become more discoverable, so we can have even more people listening to these wonderful conversations we're having with these really wonderful guests and wonderful people that come and hang out with us while we do this live. Next week we are going to be back with another guest. We're going to have Sam Baltrusas in. We're going to talk about a lot of interesting things. And so we'll see you guys next time. Until then, good night, everybody.